The night a stranger called my unborn baby hers. My husband didn't deny it, he smiled. My name is Elena Carter. I'm 29 years old, but before I tell you what actually happened, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tell me your country in the comments. The call came at 2:17 a.m. and I almost ignored it, but something in my chest tightened before I even answered. Like my body already knew the nightmare waiting on the other side. And when I finally picked up, a calm female voice whispered, "You've been taking care of my baby long enough," and before I could respond, she added, "I'll be there tomorrow to take what's mine," and then the line went dead, leaving me frozen in bed, staring at my husband sleeping beside me. Except he wasn't asleep, his eyes were open, and he was already looking at me. I laughed it off at first. Told myself it had to be some sick prank. Maybe a wrong number, maybe someone unstable. Because there was no possible way a stranger could claim my unborn child. Not when I was 8 months pregnant and had spent every moment protecting this baby. Loving it, dreaming about it, but what unsettled me wasn't the call. It was my husband's reaction, because instead of comforting me, instead of brushing it off like any normal person would, he just sat there in silence. His expression unreadable, and when I finally asked, "Do you know anything about this?" he hesitated just long enough to make my stomach drop before saying, "You're overthinking it." And that hesitation, it didn't feel like confusion, it felt like guilt. And that was the first moment a quiet fear began to grow inside me. Something I couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. Like a crack forming beneath my feet that I hadn't noticed before. And suddenly every small thing about him started to feel different. The way he avoided eye contact, the way his answers became shorter. The way he seemed to be somewhere else even when he was sitting right next to me. And I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. That pregnancy hormones were messing with my head. But deep down I knew my instincts had never been this loud before. And they weren't whispering anymore, they were screaming that something was wrong. Something bigger than a random phone call, something connected to him. And that was the part I wasn't ready to face. Because if this had anything to do with my husband, then everything I believed about my life was already starting to fall apart. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Every sound in the house felt louder, every second stretched to thin. And my husband, who used to be attentive, suddenly became distant, glued to his phone, stepping outside to take calls he wouldn't explain. And when I asked again about the woman, he snapped at me in a way he never had before, telling me to stop stressing for the baby's sake. But that only made it worse, because now it wasn't just fear. It was suspicion, and by evening, when the doorbell rang, my heart nearly stopped. And standing there was a woman I had never seen before, composed, confident. Her eyes scanning me like I was the outsider in my own home. And before I could say anything, she looked straight at my husband and said, "We need to talk about the baby," and he didn't deny knowing her. He stepped aside and let her in, and that single action felt louder than any confession. Because it told me everything I needed to know without a single word being spoken. And as she walked past me, I felt something shift in the air. Like the truth had just entered the room and there was no way to stop it now. And I followed them into the living room, my hands trembling, my heart racing. Trying to piece together what was happening while already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. And the way they looked at each other, the silent understanding between them, it made me feel invisible. Like I had somehow become the third person in a story that was never mine to begin with. And that realization, it was more terrifying than anything she could have said. I remember the room spinning as she sat down like she belonged there, placing a folder on the table, and my husband stood beside her instead of me. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. Because I realized I wasn't part of whatever truth was about to come out. And when I demanded answers, she calmly opened the folder and slid documents toward me. Medical reports, signatures, dates. My husband's name on every page, and then she said the words that made everything collapse. "This baby was never meant to be yours," and I turned to my husband, waiting for him to deny it, to laugh, to tell me this was insane, but instead, he exhaled slowly and said, "I was going to tell you." And that was the moment I understood the betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was planned, calculated, and I had been living inside a lie for months. And the more I looked at those papers, the more the pieces started falling into place in the worst possible way. Every doctor visit he insisted on attending, every form he filled out himself, every time he told me not to worry about the details. It all suddenly made sense, and not in a comforting way, but in a way that made my entire body feel cold. Because this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was something he had built carefully, step by step, without ever letting me see what was really happening. And the fact that he could stand there so calmly, watching me fall apart, made me question if I had ever truly known the man I married at all. But what broke me wasn't just the truth. It was the reason behind it, because according to them, this baby was part of an agreement, something arranged long before I even knew I was pregnant. Something involving money, desperation, and decisions made without me, and suddenly every memory felt poisoned. Every promise empty, and when I tried to stand, to leave, to escape the suffocating reality, the woman's voice stopped me cold as she said, "You don't understand. You were chosen," and that word echoed in my head, chosen, like I had never been a wife, never been a partner, just a means to an end. And I looked at my husband one last time, hoping for regret, for something human, but all I saw was silence and relief. And then she explained it in a way that made it even worse. Because it wasn't just about the baby, it was about control. About creating the perfect situation where everything would go according to their plan. And I had unknowingly played my role exactly as they expected, trusting, loving, believing, while they watched and waited for the moment they could take everything from me. And the more she spoke, the clearer it became that this wasn't something recent. It had been in motion for a long time. Long enough that there was no easy way out, no simple solution. Just a reality I had to face whether I was ready or not. I wish I could tell you I walked away strong, that I fought back immediately, that I had some perfect revenge ready. But the truth is, in that moment, I was just a woman standing in a room where her entire life had been rewritten without her consent, holding onto a baby that suddenly didn't feel safe anymore. And as I stood there staring at the two people who had decided my fate for me, one question kept repeating in my mind, louder than anything else. If the people you trust the most can build a lie this big around you without you noticing, then how do you ever know what part of your life is actually real? And even now, as I think back to that moment, I still don't have a clear answer. Because trust once broken doesn't just disappear, it leaves behind something heavier. Something that changes the way you see everything. And maybe that's the real cost of what happened, not just the betrayal itself, but the way it forces you to question every memory, every feeling, every truth you thought you knew. And that's why I'm telling you this, because I need to know. If you were in my place, standing in that room, realizing your entire life had been a carefully constructed lie, what would you do next?